What's up, guys, and welcome back to the Royale Roundtable podcast. Today we have two new guests on, Malcaide and Awdasea, and feel free to introduce yourself, guys.
Yeah. Okay. I'm Awdasea, coach for Clout Gaming's pro team right now. Took a little break, but getting back into it, having lots of fun playing the game again.
I'm Malcaide. I'm playing this game actually since it started, and I have a team which is Esport, and we are competing in most of the stuff we can against Colton more often than not.
Yeah, now you are. Now that I'm on queso.
Yeah.
I got a few of those. Yeah, so that's awesome. Really good players, good in the community and everything. So good guys. All right, Naders, feel free to take it away with questions.
Yeah, very glad to have you guys both on. You're at the very top of our guest list. Looking forward to seeing what you got to say about the game right now. The burning question in our first topic, burning question on everybody's mind with the Crown Championship going on. What are the best decks out there? What counters what? Have you found any like off-meta, crazy, something that's going to take everybody by surprise, or is it pretty kind of predictable? Let's start with you, Malcaide.
Okay, I don't think I should share 100% of the things I had in mind.
Because actually, trade secrets.
Yeah, I still haven't qualified. I haven't played. Like when Clash Royale said that you could register to all of them, I right away entered all of them. So I haven't played the first two. But the best decks is for sure Bowler Graveyard Baby Dragon. I think everybody knows this deck by heart. If you're playing the last 2 weeks, it's the best deck. And what usually happens when there is a best deck is that everybody is trying to touch the best deck against that. So Lockbait with Dart Goblin works well, but against everything else it's kind of crap. So
yeah,
it's still figuring out how it works, and nobody knows a counter to that deck that's actually working against everything else. So that's the best deck, and that's the deck to beat.
Yeah, as far as like counters to that deck go, I'd say Lava Loon is probably the best. That has a good matchup against other things. But if they use the version with Execution instead of Baby Dragon, you're screwed.
Yeah.
But if they use the Baby Dragon version, you have a good matchup because Baby Dragon Tornado isn't enough to kill Lava Loon. And then you can just or you can Lightning the Electro Wiz.
But actually,
are many people even playing the Executioner version? I've almost exclusively seen the Bowler.
No,
yeah,
actually, if you saw the final, of your qualifier, the American one, B-Rat against CMC, CMC played this deck with the Executioner instead of the Bowler. And if for the people watching this, if you still have to play your qualifier, watch this game because it was really cool, and I learned a lot from that. So yeah, with Executioner, you're actually dead. And if they play the Hawk deck, like Lightning Hawk with Executioner, then yeah, Lava Loon it's good against that, but against everything else in the meta game right now, it's not good.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think that was designed specifically to counter B-Rad because all he had been playing was the 2.9 Minor Cycle and Lava Loon.
Yeah, exactly. No, that was a really smart deck. Because otherwise, Bowler is way better because like you're gonna struggle more against Expo if you have Execution instead of Bowler. You're gonna struggle more against any Hog deck. You're gonna struggle more against Spellbait probably. So just lots of other matchups where you're gonna struggle. Three Muskets as well, and that's already a pretty tough matchup for Graveyard. So yeah, it definitely weakens the deck, except for against like 2 or 3 matchups. So I would advise using the Bowler Graveyard one. That one works really well. But as far as like other decks within the meta, I'd say Lava Loon, the Hog Spell deck, or the Hog Lightning Tornado deck, and then Spellbait's still good. 3 Musketeers is still good, and I've actually seen a decent amount of Expo, so it can be pretty solid.
Would you say on the
Bowler,
on the Spellbait front, would you say that there is a favorite between the Hog Logbait version versus the kind of Knight version that doesn't have a hog in it?
I like the Knight Ice Spirit version with Princess and Goblin Barrel and all that because the Hog kind of gets hard countered by every Tornado deck.
Yeah. Don't I know it lately?
A lot of Tornado right now.
Yeah, which is most of it right now, yeah. I would say that right now, specifically if I have to play Logbait, I would play the one with the Dark Goblin for the graveyards, because if you put it behind the King Tower, they cannot poison it. So you actually have a good counter for it. And with the Ice Spirit, you kind of have to play very well to win against graveyard in general.
Sure. Yeah, just that deck variation. I wouldn't run Hog. You can put in Dark Gob as well. It's still pretty solid, and it's kind of like a surprise card, so people will misplay against it.
Yeah.
Like if you put it at the bridge and stuff for poke. Yeah, very solid.
Yeah, I was just toying around with Dark Goblin in some decks just because everyone kind of is running Graveyard with poison, right? But it can is like the only thing that can be out of the poison and still deal with the graveyard.
Yeah, more Valkyrie is being used as well just because of that.
Yeah.
Because it can counter graveyard, which it still doesn't counter it perfectly. Like they typically get a little bit of damage, but if you can counter push with it, it's pretty solid. But I wouldn't.
The thing is, yeah, I was going to say that the thing is that people usually put the Valkyrie instead of the Knight, and for me they have a very different function because you need the Knight to stop the bridge push. Let's say the Electro Wizard or the whatever it is that goes to the bridge. So if you use the Valkyrie there, what are you gonna use on the bridge? Like skeletons or whatever, they just die at the same second. So you have a hard time defending the bridge push, even if you defend the graveyard very well. So I don't think it's a very good counter unless you play a different deck, obviously with like typical trifecta deck with something solid on the back.
Cards. You can't, because otherwise you would have to have like two different ways to counter, and it's kind of tough too if you own like if you use your tank within the graveyard, especially if it dies, if you rely on it for offense or to stop like bridge pushes, it could be tough.
I've been noticing a lot of Three Musketeers, at least last week when I was qualifying. Is that still? I haven't played in the bracket tournament. Is that still kind of a thing, or are people kind of getting hard countered at this point?
Yeah, it's used a lot. I think it's used a lot.
Yeah, it's used a lot. So there's two different versions. There's like the cycle version that runs either Goblin Gang or minions, and then there's the heavier minion horde heal variation, and they actually both work better against different things. So the cycle version is better against lightning decks, and the heal version is better versus poison decks because you can heal through poison. But they both, if you get unlucky, I don't like running them too much because if you get unlucky, they both have hard counters. So the first one gets hard countered by a lot of like control decks. It can lose to poison, and tornado decks, of course. And the second one gets hard countered by like any lightning deck. So they both lose to the hog lightning deck pretty hard.
Actually, I don't agree 100% with the second one because if they have lightning with log, okay, the musketeers are useless, but you have the minion horde with heal that cannot die. So let's say you do the lightning and the other player just used the typical attack that everybody has seen with miner and minion horde. And then you say, okay, I defend it with Electro Wizard, he just heals it, and they kill whatever you put in front for a second and your tower is gone. So unless you have lightning arrows, which obviously Lavaloon has a lot and Golems has a lot, obviously, but the Hog deck in specific is not very good because I'm going to make this explanation a little bit longer. I played yesterday a tournament against Z Temper, I don't know if you know, from Giants Spanish team. And we played the semi-final of a tournament for 14,000 euro that's going to be in Madrid next month. And we both qualified, but we were on semi-final still, and we played the final match exactly what you said. Hog with lightning against, he had this heal version, and he just knew when to bite the lock. Like whenever he saw me using the lock, he played the Goblin Gang right away, and I didn't have a counter because he can just, it's just mindset. It's like a bait deck. It's like a different play style than just dividing and attacking both lanes as you usually do with Musketeers.
Yeah. So did you? Yeah, you kind of have to manage it really, really well, especially if it's a good player. If they have Minion Horde and Goblin Gang, because they have a bunch of punish cards. Executioner helps against Minion Horde if you have it, but you can't misplay it. If you misplay it once, you lose. Or if they block you and it doesn't lock on to Minion Horde, or if you run out of Elixir. So it's definitely not easy. And that deck can be really punishing, but as if you play it, there's some matchups for sure that are like really tough. Like Lava Loon obviously is an instant loss because they have arrows, but it's a really good deck if you know how to play it.
I don't know if you guys have a preference. I've been playing the Battle Ram version, really liking it, versus some of the Hog ones.
Yeah.
Do you have a lot of experience with both versions? Do you have a preference?
I think
I've been preferring Battle Ram.
I think
too,
now
actually.
that people,
I really like
I
it.
think now people are taking Battle Ram in every Three Musketeer deck because what you can do versus Lightning decks in order to beat them, especially for the cycle variation, is you start Knight at the back. You play the Three Musketeers on top of the Knight next to your tower. So if they lightning right then, they'll hit tower and Knight, and two of your Musketeers will live. Or you can wait for the Knight to walk past, and then you immediately drop Battle Ram directly on top of them. If they lightning then they're screwed, and they have Three Musketeers pushing down the lane. So, or if they have a tank coming, the tank is already dead at this point. So if they do lightning, it's already late. So.
And actually, people always say that, you just wait for it. You just wait for this. You just wait for that. But like you wait for the battle ram to be played and then you lightning. But if the other guy is smart, he's gonna pace things in a way that even if you end up lightning only the Musketeers, they have already done so much damage, like killing a giant or something like that. So it's not that big of a deal, and he can cycle them again. So it's a very cool deck. And with battle ram, it gives this thing that people usually counter the Musketeers on the bridge, like with the lightning even. So if you just put the battle ram right away, the lightning has quite a big delay. So almost all the time, the battle ram is going to take the whole lightning in defense.
Yeah.
It's also really good.
Better than Hawk. Well, obviously better than Hawk.
Yeah, and it's like it's better because you use it on defense too, right? You throw Battle Ram when it dies. There's 2 barbs on. If it's against another 3M deck or something, or just like as an alternate win condition, if your Musketeers just never live, they got a lot of spells or something. Yeah, you don't even have to play them.
Yeah, for
yeah.
Sure.
I've been playing this deck a lot on ladder, and the thing that surprises me sometimes is how like you'll just unintentionally take a tower that you weren't even trying to because you got these big beefy barbs that they're just not paying attention to. Even if they kill the first half of the ram, they've got to deal with the back half.
Yeah, you should.
Yeah, I'm loving that
with
deck.
that deck, you should always split pressure. My favorite combo with either of the decks, whether you're playing Minion Horde or Heal or the other one, is just freaking making them log the 2 Musketeers plus like a Knight, and then just rushing the other lane with Battle Ram log, and especially if they don't have E-Wiz, they can't do anything. So really strong.
If you have an advantage on Elixir, if you have an advantage, which usually happens when you have Musketeers and the pump, you can, let's say, if only one of your lanes live, like you have a Knight and 1 Musketeer living with some, with gang, and the other guy is just actually out of Elixir at all, you can just put the Battle Ram on the other side and it's going to be hitting the tower almost 100%. So, yeah, if you have an advantage on Elixir, Battle Ram is one of the best cards that you can have at the same moment.
Yeah, the deck is very strong within the meta. It's just you just have to really. It's not an easy deck to play, but once you kind of get a feel for it, and if you have like pump 8th card for example, you can be screwed. But it's a really strong deck, especially speaking to having pump 8th card. If you have pump 8th card with the heal variation, it can take forever to get to your pump because it doesn't cycle fast. But that being said, if you don't get super unlucky, those decks have really high skill caps, and if you learn how to like manage the pressure, you can beat like counter decks pretty easily. Like Splash Yard doesn't counter 3 Musketeers if it's a good player, because they can't deal with pumps. The Musketeer player, either the person's poisoning the pumps and they don't have anything available for the Musketeers because Tornado isn't enough. You just push the other lane and pressure them, or they're poisoning the 3 Musketeers and pumping. So that deck is pretty easily overwhelmed in Elixir. If you know how to use those decks and keep up the pressure late game, they're just really hard to defend against.
The thing with the heal also is that you can just do Battle Ram heal, and he doesn't have Electro Wizard at the same time, it's just gonna reach the tower. Like unless you have like Minion Horde, the heal is so fast. Like the first thing that I saw when I saw the heal was like, this is gonna be OP. It's not that OP, but if you have a battle ram, it's going to reach the tower against the typical defenses against that. So that's one thing to have in mind. And against Musketeers, you already have too many things to think about. You know, the Ice Spirit, the Miner here, is he going to do this? Is he going to lock that? Against Musketeers, you always have to choose a lane to defend cheaply. You know, you say, okay, I'm going to defend the right one only with skeletons or only with gang. And if he predicts with the lock there, you're screwed. So it's a deck that it's difficult to play against and it's difficult to win with. And actually yesterday we played semifinals of RPO against Millennium, and I played with the deck that we just spoke about, with the Graveyard, with Bowler and so on, against this deck, and I won quite easily. And then the other player from Muklash, he played exactly the same matchup and he lost quite fast. So same matchup as Colton said, if different rotations start or if different attacks work, you can just have quite the opposite outcome depending on how the game starts.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, one of the combos too that people use quite often is like, say you're playing against a deck that has Executioner and the Executioner out of rotation, or like their Tornadoes out of rotation and they don't have Electro Wiz or something. Some of the pushes that I've seen people do late game is they'll pressure, make you waste one of those things like your big spell or your Executioner, and they'll just drop Battleran Minion Horde at the bridge and then heal it, and like you legit can't do anything if you don't have the right counters in hand, and it's so fast that it takes your tower. So
yeah,
that can be devastating.
Yeah, so some pretty good combos with that deck, and if it's used by someone that understands how to count card rotation, it's really potent.
All right.
Has anybody played any Siege in kind of the tourney meta recently? I know I saw a little bit of Expo, but not a whole lot of either.
Expo, it's just like the normal variation. Oh, there's slightly varying. Some have Goblin Gang, some have like Mega Minion, some have Electro Wiz, but it's all Cycle Expo with like Fireball. It's not bad at all. It matches up well against. Surprisingly, it actually matches up pretty well against the Hog deck. Because if from looking at it, you're like, okay, the Hog deck has like 3 tanks, right? It has Niter Valk, and then Hog, and then Executioner. But Executioner sucks as a counter. Hog isn't that great because they can like Mega Minion Ice Spirit or something, or log it or Fireball, any of these things. And then Knight's a solid counter, but you have to play Knight plus like Lightning if you want to kill it, or Knight plus Hog, which is kind of awkward. So I've actually noticed that Expo kind of wins that matchup because either it gets Fireball value, or your opponent, it's too expensive and they're not able to get everything off. One of the reasons it does match up badly against poison decks that have Ice Golem and Knight, though, like Graveyard Cycle, because you don't even Graveyard versus them. You just play Ice Golem, you poison their Expo and their tower, and when the Ice Golem's about to die, you play Knight near your tower, and you just wait for it to die. And then people just win by poisoning them to death, but you can't really do that with Lightning and these more expensive decks because you don't cycle as quickly.
I think this is only true, and actually most people use that, is the Mega Minion version. I like the most the one that Surgical did before, the one with the Electro Wizard and the Goblin Gang. But I've seen Trainer Chris lately playing the one that you said with the Ice Golem and with the Mega Minion, and I had the Hog version. I won once, and he just said, "Let's play again," and he destroyed me. He just figured out that the rotation depends a lot on using Fireball on the Executioner plus something else, because you obviously have to put the Executioner in front of the X-Bow, and the Knight's going to be tanking the X-Bow, so it's going to be going the same direction anyway. So you basically Fireball, log everything there or whatever, and at a certain point, because the Executioner is going to be targeting the Ice Golem if you do things right, so you're just going to be winning this interaction all the time, and he's going to be killing it at the end, but awkwardly, and as Colton said, losing a lot of elixir, because all this stuff are actually quite expensive, like the Lightning, obviously, the Executioner, the Hog, even, they're expensive.
I was surprised because looking at it, I thought it'd be fine, but if you're against a good Expo player, it's really tough. and you can't really go on offense because everything you do, you like your hog, it'll just die to Inferno Tower. Like Expos are really good. Expo decks are really good at defending hogs. So it's interesting matchup that actually is kind of favored for Expo. But it's
the thing.
What are you saying?
Yeah, the thing is that, let's say one time they decide not to use the Inferno and they defend the Hog Rider with Knight and Archers, and then you just lost because you say,
Expo in front,
crap,
yeah.
now he's gonna just put an X-Bow
Yeah.
and he has the Archers, and just I cannot do anything there. So yeah, the thing is that the first deck that we just spoke about, the bowler version, it's just a cake to get an X-Bow against that.
Yeah.
Just the bowler, it's too strong. I mean, the bowler in general, whenever it got introduced to the game, it killed all these versions of X-Bows and so on.
Yeah, yeah. So Expo's weird. Like it hard counters Lava Loon. It hard counters. It
actually
really
doesn't hard counter Lava
Well,
Loon.
which one? Like the night variation?
of the Lava Loon?
Yeah.
Yeah, the night variation is better. You just base race.
I think it's
they
close.
can't
I think if the
stop
Expo player is really smart, they should win. But I think it can go both ways. Yeah, you just ignore it and go opposite lane.
Yeah, I think a good Lava Loon player, if you just don't defend the Expo, because we've been testing it a lot actually, and the Lava Loon player, if they're smart, should just base race and win.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's not an unwinnable matchup. I do think Expo's still favored because they can they can just Expo and then defend heavily, but I do think it's not unwinnable. It depends on which variation. If they're running like the all air variation, I think they're screwed. But if they're running if they have Knight and they have something to tank the Expo, they have a better chance, I think.
I have only one thing to say here. Just depends on the rotation quite a lot. Like if the other guy has to start with the lava and the other guy has the X-Bow, you just lost a tower. And if he has Inferno, it's hard to break until double Elixir. It's hard to break the Inferno. So he's just gonna do the same thing the second time you use the Lava Loon. So you're gonna lose both towers unless you start defending, which actually means that you cannot attack. And at the end of the day, as Colton said, X-Bow player should win if he's a good player. And the Lava Loon, you just don't have too much room to invent anything. You know, Lava you only play the same way all the time. It depends on your rotation. So if you have a bad rotation, if you don't have anything to put on the ground like a Knight, then it's hard to just stop the X-Bow unless you do some magic with the balloon. But I don't know.
Yeah, I guess I'll have to test that more because
yeah,
I think that's the way to win with Lava Loon is you have to hope.
Just ignore
Yeah,
it.
they just go opposite lane. You can't defend it because if you do, you don't have Elixir for a push. So
The Lava Loon, if you trade towers, is better for Lava Loon because Expo is really hard to get a second tower.
For sure.
So if you can just trade, then you should win.
Yeah, I agree. It comes down to early game. If they get a tower in like one of the first couple pushes, I think Lava Loon wins. If they don't, they probably lose. Because Expo can defend Lava Loon pretty easy. But I guess it just depends on really early like rotations and stuff. But it's not an unwinnable matchup. I suppose that's true. But
going back to what you were saying, the decks that the X-Bow counters, I think it counters quite a good log bait decks, like the bait decks with ganks and Goblin Barrel and so on. Just the X-Bow is very good against that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, also it'll counter any good Expo player will counter Three Musketeers as well because you can actually fireball the pumps and then just get another fireball in time for Three Musketeers.
Yeah.
Also, if you're ever stuck in a rotation where you don't have fireball, you just plop down Expo in the middle on defense and it'll kill them from like halfway across the arena, and then you just wait and then you just like log the battle ram and then you're fine. Expo abuses Three Musketeers, and it has fireball, so minion horde's not a problem. So there's quite a few decks, but then it like if you play either graveyards like Cycle Graveyard or Bowler Graveyard, those both destroy Expo. It's really matchup dependent with Expo. Also, there's a giant deck that people still use that destroys it. Giant Lightning. It's like a giant cycle. It's like they'll have a giant available every time you play Expo. Expo versus Golem is actually interesting. Some people still play Golem. Expo can actually win that matchup if they get a tower early because Golem is an 8 elixir. So if they pump up to start the game and the other person expos, they can't get a Golem out. And if they take that tower, they win.
I was going to ask what you guys thought about Golem because that was one of the decks that I'd been seeing a lot of in challenges and stuff recently. I'm not sure about the higher tourney meta. Is Golem on the way up, on the way down? Particularly the kind of Golem Lightning deck that you're seeing a lot of.
I think it's on the way down, but I still think it's a strong deck. Just the problem is with the graveyard decks, if you get put behind or like it's really hard to recover. And a lot of people, I think, it's hard to make the decision. Like a lot of times with the Golem deck, you kind of just have to eat a lot of damage, get an elixir advantage, and then just like go for a 3-crown. And it's really hard to make calls like that, and especially like at a high level, you don't necessarily want to like go all in, right?
Yeah.
So it can be pretty hard to kind of see when your opportunities are to take advantage of it.
Yeah, and in most matchups at a high level, you can't just go for 3-crown because your opponent's going to know how to defend really well. So I think other than like Lava Loon, which is an exception versus like Expo, I don't think there is any deck that allows you to just ignore their attack because like it's not that hard to defend a Golem if you're good.
I like the new version with the lumberjack.
I do too.
Yeah. I like seeing any lumberjack
sure.
play.
It's just fun, man.
Yeah, it's fun. I did play against it once in like the 3rd round or something. Or wait, no, actually, no, I played it in the round of 32 yesterday. In the 1st round, I think the player. Either that one or the round of 16. Either way, he only played Beatdown because I looked at his matches from before. He only played Beatdown. Yeah. He played Lava Loon and Golem. So I played Executioner, Tornado Cycle, and like legit after I took his tower with Hog from pressuring him every time he played pumps, he played like his Golem down. He had his like last final push. And I played Executioner. He plays like some of his support behind the Golem, and I play play Knight at the top, cycle cards, and then I just tornado everything backwards. And then he lightnings my Executioner. I get to another Executioner, play it down before the Golem gets the tower, and then I tornado backwards again. And that's how I ended the match without him like touching the tower other than lightning. So it gets pretty abused.
If it's 20 seconds longer the game, it gets harder and harder. You know, like if he starts pressuring you from the beginning, if you don't take a tower, like all the matches that I've won with this deck is usually 3-1 or 3-2 or stuff like that. You know, just insane. Like I actually made a video recently with this deck, and I call this deck just forget defending. You know. Whatever it is, Hog Rider, I don't know, skeletons, they log it, okay, 1 tower less, I guess. You know, you don't care.
Really,
you just
that's kind of how it is with beatdown too. Like sometimes you just have to know when to give up a tower, when to take damage in order to build up elixir for a push. Because if beatdown gets in a situation where it's 1-to-1, they should win. Like because they're just gonna, they just start they force you to go down the lane they want to go down, and their push just overwhelms you. But against really good players, 1-0 victories aren't that hard to come by. So I think in top tier play kind of struggles, I still think it's good in grand challenges. And Lava Loon is still good at any level. So
I usually, when I play against Golem, I try to take 2 towers. Like I win 1 and right away go for the second before double elixir. And if you get 2, you can obviously let 1 die and defend the push before you lose 3 crown. But it's like a balance, you know, it's hard to do. And if you don't manage to get 1 tower, or let's say you trade towers and you see how he puts his Golem on the lane to get 3 crown, you know you're screwed, you know. Yeah. You just know you cannot defend that because obviously everything that you rely on is the health of your towers as a resource against beatdown because they can just lightning your towers or, I don't know, furnace. So the thing is that the health of your towers matters quite a lot against beatdown because in the last minute is when you have to use this as a resource.
Yep. All right, we have another question. We got about 15 minutes left.
Yeah, maybe last thing for the decks. What about minor control? Are there any really good minor control decks that still kind of work?
2.9.
I think just the
2.9.
one.
Just the 2.9.
Yeah, there's one, and no one but B-Rad should play it, honestly. Honestly, I'm surprised, like, if you're as good as he is with it, like, it legit is only countered by Three Musketeers Heal and Bowler Graveyard.
That's the thing, like, no matter what you're playing, if you are, like, an expert in that deck and that style, as long as it's not so far out of the meta that it's terrible, you're gonna be able to compete, I think.
And Minor Poison has always been, like, the epitome of a deck that doesn't have counters. It has bad matchups, but it doesn't have counters, so if you're really good with it, you can, and B-Rad is obviously really good with it. And apparently he can play Lava Hound too, as I found out and got screwed in the first round. I played Graveyard Cycle without Inferno because I thought he was going to play Minor.
Yeah.
So I was...
The thing is... the thing is that I have played a lot this deck, you know. I can think of myself as a very good Minor player. When I went to the Paris tournament, I played the same deck with Musketeer because Electro Wizard wasn't a thing back then. And I had like 5 decks prepared for this tournament. I ended up playing this same deck all matches, you know, because you're playing against people that you don't know, so you know that this deck is solid against everything. That's what I'm trying to say. You just know that, okay, you have bad matchups, but you don't have like X-Bow against Bowler matches, you know?
Yeah.
You don't have these matches that you say, okay, I just lost. And if you're good and if you're smart, you can get some attacks with Knight, with Skeletons, stuff like that, take 1,000 damage, and that's it, you know? That's everything that you need with this deck. You need 1,000 damage, exactly. Let's say 1,500 before double Elixir, and you're going to win if you manage to defend, and this deck is obviously very good in defending. So right now, Poison has, like, it's very bad against heal decks because just Poison just doesn't do anything. And it's a bad against Graveyard as well, and those are the both decks played very well. Against they are played a lot, and against the Lightning deck is not that good because your defense is basically the Inferno, and the Electro Wizard can be Lightning as well. So yeah, all the 3 decks that you can see the most counter this deck, and even so, B-Rad can use it to reach the finals on the qualifier.
It's really a deck that and it takes someone really good at the counter decks to beat him. Not only did when he played against him, he covered Execution for Lava Hound, but he also took out Skeletons and put an Ice Spirit for the Minor, so that he could freeze it and block it with like Knight. So the games were still pretty close. Like B-Rad is just so good with that deck. I'd say, yeah, for sure. The hard counters are heal and graveyard decks. But if you're really, really good with it, it does well against everything else. Lightning can be tough, but if you're good, like B-Rad would never give you lightning value. Like you could either lightning only Inferno or only Electro Wiz. He spaces them out, and then he can cycle to another one if he needs to. So that matchup is a little bit better. Still probably favors other player, but if you just like want to dedicate a ton of time to any one deck, Minor Poison is probably the way to go. So for sure, I do think it's best though, and what I like to do is I'll get like 3 to 4 decks, probably like 4 decks that all are really different and they all cover each other's weaknesses. Because and they're all well rounded still, because I hate playing decks that get hard countered by like any one thing. I like playing playing balanced decks. It's the reason
I agree with that.
It's the reason I play almost all control decks now. That's not entirely true. I play a little bit of beatdown, but I don't like Siege all that much. I know how to play against it, but I don't like playing Siege because Siege is like Siege is the thing that gets hard countered, and hard counters other things more than anything else. And I just don't like that risky playstyle. I don't like risking the matchup to win. But it's a way to play. Like if you get the right matchups, you'll dominate. So
that's the thing. It's risky.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Whenever I play a tournament, like a big one, I have played already 3 or 4 live tournaments, and they are usually best of 5. 6 matches, so you play all day. And you say, okay, I'm playing against this guy, and he has to beat me with my Minor Poison. I know he knows I'm going to play it, but it doesn't matter. Unless he beats me one game, because it's a best of 5, doesn't matter if it's not like it doesn't matter, but if you lose one game, it doesn't happen. It doesn't matter too much. So, yeah, unless someone beats me with this deck, it can be Minor Poison, it can be Hog Cycle, whatever is the deck that I feel the best, I just play it. And sometimes I just 3-0, you know? But I have my 3, 4, 5 decks that I have prepared. So later on, when I play against the Surgicals in the tournament, I have something prepared.
Yeah.
But usually these back decks, you haven't played them that much and in competition. So it's hard to have a prepared 4 good decks, because at the end you just see the meta game of the tournament. And if it's something that counters like the 2 decks that you had the most prepared, then you have really, really short time to adapt.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like, if you think you're like the better player and you think, you know, like I can beat this guy if I just play safe, whatever, play your comfort deck and you can just beat him, then you just go with that. Whereas if you think you're playing it someone better than you, you think, you know, you got to make a risk, then you go for a riskier play. You know, you may want to bring out the Expo or the Golem or something, right? Play something a little riskier to try and take like a surprise win or something.
Yeah, for sure. Because there are some matchups where it's just impossible to win if you get the right matchup, unless you just like massively misplay. But yeah, the Siege and Beatdown are the riskier ones. Obviously, Control is the safer deck that most people like rely on in competitive play. But there's definitely, if you're good with Beatdown or Siege, you can, if you get the right matchup, and there's some matchups they go even with, but most it's one way or the other. You can kind of overpower someone. So it's just a difference in the amount of risk you want to take, and all 3 succeed. I don't know, no archetypes are bad right now. Like I saw every archetype. Both qualifiers I've played so far.
Yeah. That's something that I love right now. Is like, you know, a few months ago it was like, okay, there's one minor deck and like one giant poison deck, and like, but now it's like there's all these different types and there's all these different variations. Like it's awesome.
Yeah,
I love it.
I mean, enjoy variety. Some people hate it.
Let's end. I'd actually like. So Colton's got to hop on a tournament here in a few minutes. So let's end on this question. We have talked recently a lot about the level of variation of popular decks in the meta, and there's a lot of pros that really hate this. They say, oh, it just comes down to who counters what. I think the opposite problem, no matter what you think about that, if that fine, that viewpoint is valid, but the opposite is so much worse, right? When there's 2 or 3 maybe at most decks that are really dominating the meta, that is just has to be worse, right? I mean,
yeah, I agree.
That variation is having a lot of good decks out there is the sign that your game is balanced. So I don't see this viewpoint that having a lot of decks out there is bad for the game.
Honestly, in my opinion, like all they need to do is do balance changes, like shake it up. It's not even necessarily that like some of the cards that are OP, nerf them. Some of the ones that are bad, buff them. Because really, on the same balance patch, like a month ago, the decks were entirely different. It takes a long time for people to find what's perfect in the meta, and to find what kind of dominates. And if you do another balance change, then you're in this state of flux again, to where people don't know exactly what's best, and it's a little bit less matchup dependent. And maybe nerf some of the trouble cards or whatever. But like I think Loon is stupid just in general. But aside from specific nerfs and buffs, I just think. Oh, and
Ewiz is absurd right now.
Yeah, Ewiz is.
I think we can all agree.
Ewiz used in almost every deck.
Off the charts.
But aside from specific balance changes, I would heavily advocate against going back to like a 2-deck meta, because honestly, that was like a 1-deck meta. The best players all ran minor. They didn't run giant. All the best players ran minor. They could beat giant. It's like you didn't have a bad matchup. Minor worked against everything, and now it's a little bit more risky, and you have to be like amazing at it. But I think if you go back to where you have this 1 or 2 deck meta, you not only get some players who heavily dislike it. I never liked it. I didn't like playing 1 or 2 things. It was boring. Like and as much as it is matchup dependent for other things, it's dependent on a card cycle when you're playing the same decks. It's like if one person starts out with a better cycle, they maintain it for the most of the game. But also, and this is the most important I think, is no viewer, which if you're a pro player, you should take note of this, especially if you want this to become an esport. You need viewership. You need the casual player base to watch. And if the casual player base sees the exact same freaking 1 or 2 deck over and over again, they're going to get extremely bored. They don't care how skillful your matchup is. They're going to get bored. They don't want to watch it. and you're nothing without people that want to watch you play. Like, I wouldn't be popular. I wouldn't have like a bunch of Twitter followers, a bunch of YouTube subs. None of us would if people didn't like watching us do this. So that's the most important thing. Like, if you want this to be an esport, then you can't have it be like that. Maybe balance changes are needed, but you can't go back to that.
They need to keep shaking up the meta with balance changes and stuff. I agree. Trying to promote cards that aren't played a lot and maybe tone down cards that are played a lot. Ewiz. But keep things shifting. But have the level of variation in the top decks that they have right now, I think, is great. That you can't have a better signal of how well you're doing with balancing a game than the fact that there are many different good decks out there. And as you said, it's great for the spectators because they get some variety in the tournaments rather than just Goizen, minor control, over and over again.
I do think that Graveyard is kind of stupid, honestly. I mean, I think it was, I think Clash Vitage spoke with, I don't remember, I don't want to misspell, but they were speaking about the fact that Graveyard is the only random card in this game.
Yep.
And I do believe that it's a good opportunity to amend that, to reward the Graveyard and to not have that kind of cards. Because if you have a Hearthstone background, if you have Magic background, I don't know, any other type of cards, that randomness, it's the opposite of esport. Because no matter what happens, if you defend the Graveyard with a Knight and the first three skeletons appear on the side of the King Tower, you're going to lose that tower. If that doesn't happen, it's 1,000 damage difference. Randomness, this can be $1 million tournament can be defined by this. So I think that Graveyard should be rewarded. Regardless of the fact if it's stronger or not, it should be rewarded. And Balloon, for me, people say that it's high risk, high reward. For me, it's medium risk, high reward.
Medium risk for sure.
Yes. Yeah. So, and especially with the bomb now, that is stronger, it has bigger radius, it's going to kill the archers usually, it's going to kill most of the stuff. So, yeah, those are cards that can be toned down, as Cauton said, like everything can be changed. People complain about counter decks, but they just don't like to play balanced decks. Even amazing players like CMC Huge, they just like some kind of decks and they want to play with it, but they have one hard counter or two. Me and Colton, we have agreed right now on is that we like to play good, all-rounded decks, which means that they are not the best, but they are all-rounded. And he plays decks, and most of people that complain, they play amazing decks, but they have one or two counters. Yeah. So obviously they lose even against players that are level 8.
Yep, and yeah, so I think that's definitely true, and I agree so much with the Graveyard thing. Like, I like using Graveyard. I don't think Graveyard is like a bad card. I think it's like fair, but I think in Clash Royale, the suggestion that he said was have like 3 different ways that Graveyard can spawn, and then but you can identify which one that is for the hardcore players. You can identify which one that is by like where the first skeleton spawns or something. So that's like predetermined. Maybe that would be like a decently hard nerf, but I think that's important because you need to make it not random, because and it goes both ways. Like and we kind of talked about this on last podcast, but I'm adamant about this.
And we'll keep talking about it until something happens with the issue.
Until it's changed or it's removed. Like I like Graveyard, but if it means removing it because you don't want to make it standardized, then do it, because it.
I like having no randomness or a little bit of randomness. That doesn't affect things too much in the game.
But that's
but you can't have one card out of 70,
impactful
72.
Too, especially a card
it is game changing.
A card that's been so big for so long, and it decides matches. Like I almost like dread going and watching my replay, like, because when I played against B-Rad and I played Graveyard, I lost by 60 HP. That's one swing of a skeleton, and I really don't want to go back and look and see where the skeletons spawn, because it goes both ways. They can spawn really bad for you, or they can spawn really good for you. You can get more damage than you should when you don't deserve it, or you can get less damage than you should when you do deserve it because your opponent doesn't counter correctly. So it's just it goes both ways, and games should be left up to how you play matchups and how well you defend something. You shouldn't be able to defend or go on offense the exact same way and have a 500 damage difference. That's just not a thing that should happen.
I think the best example, and this is going to be short, the best example is just to test it at your place with 2 phones, Graveyard against Poison. Like, sometimes it does just 100 damage. Sometimes
Yeah.
it does 700, and that's stupid.
Yeah.
That's a really, yeah,
Absolutely.
that's a really. I've been on the
Very good
poison
point.
side of that many times, and it sucks when you drop a poison and just watch nothing happen.
Yeah.
You know.
Yep. All right. Well, I guess I gotta head out soon. So if you want to wrap it up.
Yeah, guys, give a shout out. Let the people know what's going on in your life. Odyssey, I'll start with you.
Give a shout out to Cloak Gaming team. Hopefully we see some of them in the finals. The tournament's coming up. A bunch of guys playing in that, doing pretty well, but it's pretty hard. A lot of big names. So shout out to them and putting in all the hard work.
Yep.
Yeah,
All right.
Malcaide?
And from my side, of course, shout out to Esports and to the almost 80,000 Spanish subscribers that I don't know if they're going to watch this, but hola a todos. And of course, good luck to all the Muklas players. I think when I came to speak with you guys, we had 3 players in the top 16 on the Latin American qualifiers. So I hope that when I come back to Discord, some of them qualified, and we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't have time for it this week, but follow Colton and myself on Twitter and ask us your questions there, because we will answer them on the next podcast.
Yeah, and thank you guys so much for coming on. I enjoy doing this every week. We'll try to be back on next week on time. Yeah, and definitely go follow these guys on Twitter as well. Both really good players and really good managers and people that have helped further the esport and everything. So, thank